Do these pseudo-modest responses and this general conversation seem familiar to you? So, tell me, how'd you get into MIT? I didn't really think about it. I just sent in an application and, I guess I got lucky. They just sent me an admission letter. The sorting hat sorted me there. Time for a story. In middle school, I had this teacher. Since she always used to wear all black, we'll call her Mrs. Black. She was an English teacher. To this day, she is the hardest and the strictest teacher I've ever had. I even got my first detention from her for giving another kid my homework. But that's an entirely different story. I think a perfect way to describe and define our class was through her grading system. Every single grade was a borderline case. There was no 95s or 86s or 84s or 75. They were all between that little 2-point range of 89.5 and 91 or 79.5 and 81. That tiny little range where one missing homework assignment can drop you to the lower grade. All the grades were like that. I mean, statistically, that's not even possible. So, in this class, when Halloween rolled around the corner, Mrs. Black decided to give us a short story assignment. I mean, normally in all my other classes, even my junior year of high school, we would give out candy during Halloween. We would celebrate. We'd have parties. But nope, not in Mrs. Black's class. Mrs. Black gave us a short story assignment, and she made sure to tell us that this was a huge deal. Her lecture was so intense about how important this essay was. By the time she was finished, I was convinced that if I failed this essay, then I would fail her class. And if I failed her class, I would fail the 6th grade. And if I failed the 6th grade, I would have to repeat the 6th grade. If I had to repeat the 6th grade, I would be depressed and wouldn't want to be able to finish high school. If I didn't finish high school, I wouldn't go to college. If I didn't go to college, I wouldn't be able to get a job. If I didn't get a job, I would have to go to work in my parents' office or have to live with my parents, live off my parents. And my life would be terrible. So, in the light of all of this, this was a big deal. So I decided to spend the next 3 days meticulously planning and writing and editing my essay. Even the night before, I stayed up all night just making sure this was perfect. Practiced my oral presentation in front of the mirror several times to make sure that I said everything correctly. I wanted this to be perfect. By the time I was finished, I was exhausted and confident that this story was going to knock everybody's socks off. So I go to school the next day and meet up with my best friend. This was the same kid that I gave my homework to earlier and got a detention for, because he copied every single word from that homework assignment verbatim. I was still a bit salty from that and kind of thought he was an idiot. Guess what? Unsurprisingly, he didn't even start his project, and he didn't even seem worried about it. Then, later on, when lunchtime rolled around, reality hits this kid like a train. He begins frantically writing in his math notebook in illegible chicken scribbles. I felt really bad for him, but I kind of felt like he deserved it. So he ends up finishing by the end of the lunch period. And he always has these semi-cocky, pseudo-philosophical 6th grade comments. And as always, he just kind of said, "I told you so. You don't need to try so hard at school. Besides, it's alright, man. This doesn't really matter in life." I was impressed by his ability to take failure, and I knew he was kind of right. So English was the very next period of the day. And when Mrs. Black asked who wanted to go first, my friend raised his hand. I swear to God, I cannot believe what happened next. This kid pulled off some sort of Stephen King meets Chris Angel magic. As soon as he opened up his mouth, he spat out some sort of mystery romance thriller masterpiece. I hated that my story sucked in comparison to his, but I couldn't help but applaud. The teacher even gave him the approving "you're the man" nod. He got 100 on that project. One of the only 100 she gave out that year. I realized that my idiot friend was a bona fide genius. I realized that he was way smarter than I could ever be. And he still is. But that brings me right to the point of my story. I know this is true for a lot of people. So the number of people that I've met like my 6th grade friend far outweigh the number of people who I know who got into a quote-unquote top school. And statistically speaking, that makes sense. There are a lot of factors that can stop true geniuses from getting into the Ivy Leagues. So many factors, in fact, that most of them, I would say, don't. This fact leads to something interesting called the Impostor Syndrome. By its dictionary definition, the Impostor Syndrome is the inability to internalize accomplishments and a fear of being exposed as a fraud. It's nearly impossible for me and most Ivy League and top school admits to truly feel like they deserve the seat that they got. Because there are so many other talented and brilliant kids who are often way smarter, well, at least in my case, way smarter than me, who I've met who aren't in these seats. Now, let me get this straight. I'm not complaining or crying about this by any measure. I just feel like I won the lottery, to be honest. That's just the best way to describe it. But when someone asks me, or asks us, how we got into these schools, the imposter syndrome just flies in like a bullet. All we can really say is, well, luck. So I guess the only other real answer than luck is to work your ass off. So I guess a better question is, how'd you find the motivation to work so hard? So that's exactly what I asked. Here's a couple responses from other MIT 2020 admits.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I've always wanted to be the best at something, and in elementary school for me that was singing, so my identity was sort of like the singer. But in 6th grade I moved to a different school, and when people already held that role as the singer, I decided to opt for the easier route and do something different. So I decided to become the smart kid, because that's the only other thing people really told me I was good at. But luckily over time I found my own motivation for studying, but really it all started trying to find my own identity.
I always approached school as, what's the most fun I can have with this assignment? Because I figured anyone can work hard and get the job done to do what the teacher asked, so why not do something completely different? So, for example, for A-Push, when we wrote our first DBQ, the teacher gave us a 3-page rubric, or a list of things that we could include and ways to make the paper successful, but never on the page did it say that we had to write an essay. So I wrote a rap instead. I fulfilled every obligation on the rubric, I just did it in a way that was fun. And that was probably my most tame stunt. So my motivation for doing well in school was never a motivation to do everything perfectly, but more of a motivation to do everything imperfectly, to see how far I could push the system. I never saw high school or homework as work, but rather as an opportunity to put my own unique spin on the task at hand in a way that was intelligent, witty, and enjoyable for me to do. It certainly made the all-nighters more worth it.